The fog clung low over the bay, turning the water into a sheet of shifting silver. The first light of morning slipped through in thin streaks, painting the swell in pale blue and faint gold. Kelp fronds drifted just beneath the surface, their long brown ribbons sliding back and forth with the tide. Gulls hovered in the gray air, wings still, eyes locked downward. The harbor behind was barely awake, just a few deck lights burning, a few silhouettes moving on the piers. Farther out, where the bottom dropped away and the water darkened, a black back rose, smooth, certain. It cut through the surface, gleaming in the weak light, then rolled gracefully away. A tall dorsal fin followed, carving a clean line before slipping under again. A moment later, the bubbles started. They appeared in thin threads at first, rising from the depths in scattered lines. Then the pattern tightened, curving, twisting. The bubbles formed a ring, then another, a white halo on the water. Inside that circle, the water erupted with movement. A tight ball of herring spun in frantic, flashing spirals, trapped in something they couldn't see but couldn't pass through. Below, the orca moved like a shadow. She traced the outer edge of the ring, her body long and powerful, releasing bursts of air with precise timing. Each release added to the wall, tightening it, sharpening its edge. The herring pressed inward, crowding into the only safe space left, and then she struck. She came up through the center of her own bubble ring, jaws open, body rising in one clean vertical surge. For an instant, the world above and below seemed to freeze around her. Fish tumbled, scales catching the pale light. Then she rolled, swallowed, and vanished. If you want to know how one orca turned the ocean around her into a weapon, how she used bubbles not just to hunt fish, but to manipulate human behavior and pull an entire coastal community into a mystery they still can't fully explain, stay with this story. And if you into real-world animal intelligence that feels more like a crime thriller than a nature documentary, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Her name, at least to the scientists who studied her, was Sura. To the fishermen, she'd become something else entirely long before they knew she had a catalog ID. They called her Ghost Net, not because she was invisible. Everyone knew when she was near, but because she made her own nets out of nothing at all. Just air, just water, just thought. The first time anyone realized something was different about her, it was written off as a story. One of those dockside tales that gets told at the end of a long day when the beer's cold, the sun's going down, and it feels good to share something half-true just to see if anyone calls you on it. It came from a longliner named Bill Sawyer, a man who'd spent more of his life standing on wet deck planks than dry land. Bill wasn't the type to exaggerate. He wasn't the type to say, "You not gonna believe this," unless he genuinely thought you wouldn't. But that's exactly how he started. "You're not gonna believe this," he told the others in the dim harbor bar, fingers still creased from rope, eyes still red from the wind. "We've seen whales before, Bill," one of the younger guys said. "We know what they do." "Not like this," Bill said. He'd been running gear off the shelf, where the bottom dropped fast, and the herring sometimes stacked so thick his sonar screen lit up like a Christmas tree. The day had been calm, the sky low and flat. He'd set his lines, marked his buoys, and waited. When he came back to haul, something had changed. "The water looked wrong," he said. "Like a pot just before it boils." There had been bubbles on the surface, thick and clustered, rising in a ring around his closest buoy. Inside that ring, the water stirred, bright with frantic movement. As he eased the boat closer, he saw them herring, packed tight, swirling in one tight ball. The kind of bait ball he wished he'd created on purpose. At first, he thought they'd gotten themselves trapped in some kind of vent, some strange bottom release. Then he saw the fin, medium height, strong, cutting across the surface. Black back, white oval near the eye. It moved in a smooth arc just outside the ring, then disappeared. Seconds later, the orca surged up through the middle of the circle, as clean and vertical as a missile launch. Her jaws closed over a column of fish. She twisted, fell, and vanished into the water like she'd never been there. "And the thing is," Bill said, eyes hard now, leaning over his untouched drink, "she didn't just do it once." He'd watched her repeat the behavior bubbles, ring, trap, strike over and over. Not clumsy, not random. Each time, the ring formed faster. Each time, the fish clustered tighter. Each time, she seemed to adjust a tiny detail, as if she were refining a trick she'd invented herself. Nobody believed him at first. They believed him less when, a few days later, he said he saw her do it again with another orca. "Teaching the kid," he'd said. "I swear to you." He described the scene, the same orca building a bubble ring, a smaller one hanging clumsily on the outside, misjudging their distance, cutting through the bubbles and ruining the pattern. Instead of giving up, the older orca adjusted. She widened the ring, tightened it again, and drove the fish toward the young one. That young one took fish on the second pass. "That's not instinct," Bill told anyone who'd listen. "That's training." This time, someone did listen. Not one of the fishermen. Not at first. But a bartender's sister had a friend who worked part-time at the Regional Marine Research Center 2 towns over. The story filtered its way from the bar to her, from her to her supervisor, and from there to someone who could recognize what it meant. Dr. Nora Klein read the report over coffee at a cluttered desk, one knee pulled up under her, hair yanked back in a messy knot. She'd been studying cetacean behavior for almost 12 years, long enough to know that most wild stories collapsed under scrutiny. But every once in a while, one didn't. "It's probably a humpback bubble that someone misread," her colleague said. "Fisherman sees what he wants to see. It happens." "Humpbacks don't move like that," Nora replied, scanning the handwritten notes. "And we don't have recorded bubble net feeding from orcas in this region. Not like this," her colleague shrugged. "Maybe he's confused." Nora stared at the line Bill had written in block capitals. She made a wall of air. She closed the folder. "I'm going to check," she said. The following week, Nora stepped onto a small research boat with an aging hull and a bank of freshly calibrated hydrophones. The captain, a woman named Leah with a deep tan and a shallow tolerance for nonsense, tilted her head when Nora explained what they were looking for. "Whale-blowing bubbles?" Leah had said. "You sure this isn't a kid's story?" "It might be," Nora said. "Or it might be the most interesting behavioral anomaly I've seen in 5 years." They found her on the second day. The water was glassy that afternoon. Thin clouds stretched high and bright across the sky. The boat drifted near a patch of deeper blue where the fish finder showed thick layers of herring. Nora leaned on the rail, binoculars ready, eyes burning from focus. The hydrophone picked up distant clicks, faint and irregular. Then Leah cut the engine, lifted a hand, and nodded toward a distortion ahead. Nora saw it immediately. A ring. Bubbles rose in a circle, too uniform to be accidental. The fish inside spun and folded in on themselves, bouncing off the edges, never quite breaking through. Outside the ring, a dark shadow moved. It circled, streamlined, and powerful, adding new bursts of bubbles with uncanny precision. Nora's breath hitched. "That's her," she whispered. They watched the orca rise through the center of the ring, throat expanding as she surged upward. Fish scattered, but not enough. She twisted, swallowed, and dropped back into the blue. "Jesus," Leah murmured. "She really is making nets." Nora didn't answer. She was already recording video, audio, notes scribbled in shorthand only she could decode. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a live experiment. She watched the orca adjust the size of the ring, the density of the bubbles, the timing of her strike. Sometimes she let the fish cluster longer before lunging. Sometimes she drove through them quickly, leaving more escapees but spending less energy. "This is optimization," Nora said quietly. "She's tweaking variables." "English, Doc." "She's running models in her head," Nora said. "Testing, learning, improving." Leah snorted. "You're telling me that whale down there is doing math?" "Not numbers, outcomes." Nora's voice was steady now. "Prediction, cause and effect. If I do this, they do that. If I change this, they move differently." The Orca surfaced closer to the boat, just for a moment. Nora could see her more clearly now. Female, no obvious scars. A slim, confident build. Then she dove again. From that day on, Nora watched her whenever she could. She saw her teach a juvenile, just like Bill had described. She watched her adjust her patterns when the tide shifted. She saw her abandon a ring mid-formation when a seal slipped into the perimeter. Different kind of prey, requiring a different strategy. Every observation deepened the same conclusion. This wasn't just learned behavior. This was innovation. Nora wrote up her first report cautiously, knowing what it would trigger if she overstated anything. The paper framed the bubble rings as novel prey capture structures and emphasized possible cultural transmission within the pod. It drew comparisons to documented examples of bubble net feeding in humpbacks, but highlighted key differences: individual rather than group hunting, smaller ring size, faster execution, dynamic modifications. It was the safest way to say what she really thought. This orca was doing something new. The paper circulated quietly. A few colleagues reached out with questions. A couple of reviewers pushed back gently, suggesting alternative interpretations. But no one denied the footage. You couldn't watch Sura Hayes, GhostNet, whatever you wanted to call her, work the water and say it was random. The first time things turned dark, it seemed like pure accident. A chartered fishing boat, the Lacey Dawn, reported losing a deckhand overboard on a calm morning. No one saw exactly how it happened. One minute he was at the rail, checking a bait line. The next minute he was gone. They turned the boat around, circled, searched, called the Coast Guard. They found him 20 minutes later, floating face up, life jacket half unbuckled, eyes open and unfocused. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning. Maybe he slipped. Maybe he leaned too far over. Maybe he had a medical event before he hit the water. There were a dozen explanations that fit. But there was one detail in the captain's report that didn't fit anything Nora knew. The water around where he fell, the captain had said, rubbing the bridge of his nose, looking anywhere but Nora's eyes. It was fizzy, like someone had turned on a giant underwater air hose. "Bubbles?" Nora asked. "Big ones," he replied. "In a bunch." Then nothing. He didn't mention a whale. He didn't have to. The location was the same patch of deep water where Sura had been hunting the week before. The same coordinates where Nora had filmed the tightest bubble rings. Nora didn't put that in any official report. She filed it away. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Then came the diver. He was young, skilled, wearing a brand new dresssuit and a camera rig worth more than Nora's car. He and his partner had gone out to film kelp forests and rock formations for a tourism channel. The partner surfaced when his tank neared reserve pressure. The diver didn't. Search and rescue found his body 3 hours later, near the edge of a steep drop-off. His tank still held air. His regulator was intact. His mask, according to the report, was missing. The partner said he'd seen bubbles everywhere, just before they separated. Not diver exhaust, bigger, rising from below them in a curved wall. The Coast Guard logged it as a probable panic episode. Disorientation, mask knocked off, regulator maybe dislodged. A tragic mistake, but the families didn't accept that. And quietly, neither did Nora. She pulled up the hydrophone data from that day. There they were, the clicks, not random chatter, structured sequences. An orca's hunting pattern, and beneath them, the faint hiss of rising bubbles. Sura had been there. Had she spooked the diver? Startled him just enough for one small mistake? Or had something else happened in that pale blue, bubble-thick water that no camera had caught? That was when Nora learned two truths that would drive everything after. One, the line between hunting behavior and incidental danger was much thinner than anyone liked to admit. And two, once humans suspected an animal might be involved, especially an apex predator, the story stopped being science and started becoming something closer to crime. The word nobody wanted to say yet was the one that would hang over every conversation: culpability. Could an orca be responsible for a human death? Could intention even be measured? And if you found out the answer was yes, what would you do with that knowledge? Sura kept building bubbles. The ocean kept swallowing secrets. And the town, the scientists, and the people whose lives brushed up against hers were about to find out just how far one orca could go when she realized that controlling bubbles meant controlling everything inside them. The sea rolled under a cold, late-morning sun, the surface broken only by the rise and fall of distant swells. A few fishing boats bobbed far out near the horizon, their nets drying in long, pale tangles. The harbor buzzed with low voices, boots on wood planks, the clatter of equipment. The stories about Sura had begun spreading faster than the tide, and with each retelling, the edges sharpened. Some said she'd built bubble rings so large they rattled buoys. Others claimed she could split a school of herring with the flick of her tail. A rare few whispered about the diver found dead, the young deckhand who didn't make it back, the strange bubbling water that seemed to appear before each accident. There was no proof that Sura had caused anything, but uncertainty filled the spaces facts couldn't reach, and uncertainty had a way of turning into fear. Dr. Nora Klein wasn't afraid, exactly, but she wasn't calm either. She stood on the deck of the Anna Rose, tightening the straps of her life jacket, while her mind replayed every bubble pattern she'd seen. Every flick of Sura's tail, every change in the shape of the rings, every moment when the orca seemed to pause, adjust, refine. She'd seen whales innovate before. She'd seen orcas teach, but she had never seen an animal treat water like a tool set. Something was building, something deliberate, and whatever it wasn't slowing down. Leah stepped out of the cabin. "Radio's clear? Weather's good? You ready?" "As I'll ever be," Nora said. They pushed off from the dock and glided out past the breakwater. A few fishermen watched, pausing in their gear prep. Nora caught snatches of conversation. That bubble maker whale, dangerous behavior. Someone should track it. The mood had shifted from curiosity to suspicion. When they cleared the harbor, Leah opened the throttle slightly. The boat hummed across the water, leaving a white wake behind. "You think we'll see her today?" Leah asked. "I don't know," Nora said, scanning the horizon. "But she's been hunting almost daily. If the herring are here, she won't be far." They reached the deeper ridge after an hour. Nora lowered the hydrophone. Static, then distant clicks, then quiet. She frowned. "She's close, but not too close. Maybe she's not hunting," Leah said. "Or she learned something new and moved to try it." The thought made Nora's pulse rise. 15 minutes later, they found the first sign. A buoy line drifting strangely, rocking side to side as if something tugged it from below. Nora lifted her binoculars. No swell, no wind, no reason for the movement. "Leah," she said slowly, "take us in." As the boat eased closer, the water ahead distorted. Thin strings of bubbles rose in a loose arc. Then a second arc formed. Then both arcs twisted sideways, merging seamlessly into a single curved wall. "That's new," Nora breathed. "She's making crescents." The herring inside moved differently, now shifting left, then abruptly right, as though something inside the bubble structure guided them. Nora filmed the entire pattern, heart pounding. Then the water erupted. Sura burst upward, not through the center, but through the edge of the crescent ring, driving the fish into a narrow column she sliced through with surgical precision. The leftover fish scattered, but not far. A second orca, a juvenile, surged through the remnants, managing a clean strike. "She's not just teaching anymore," Nora said. "She's rehearsing." Sura surfaced closer to the Anna Rose this time. Her dorsal fin glistened. She exhaled sharply, then dipped below again, almost brushing the underside of the hull as she passed. "She's checking how close she can get," Leah murmured. "She's mapping us," Nora whispered. But the moment held something else too, an unspoken tension, a kind of pressure in the air that didn't belong to wind or tide. Then the radio crackled. "This is Harbor Patrol. Be advised, a tour boat reported unusual bubbling near the north inlet. Use caution." Leah muttered. "Unusual bubbling?" "That's her." Nora's stomach tightened. "We need to see it." But before they could turn the boat, Sura's behavior changed. She dove deep. Too deep. The hydrophone captured rapid clicks, fast, irregular, threaded with tones Nora had never heard from her before. Not distress, not aggression. Alert. "What is she doing?" Leah asked. "I don't know," Nora said. But something spooked her. The bubbles returned, but this time not as rings. They rose in straight columns, almost like pillars, spaced evenly across the surface. Each column widened as it rose, forming bright, silvery funnels. Fish fled the area instantly. "What is this?" Leah breathed. "Not hunting," Nora said. "Warning. For us or something else?" Nora didn't answer. A second shadow appeared beneath the columns, bigger than Sura, broader. Not an orca. Not a humpback. Something with a shape too long, too heavy, too unfamiliar. It moved in slow vertical surges, like a body rising against its own weight. Leah grabbed the throttle. "We're getting out of here." "No," Nora said. "Wait." Sura shot upward toward the larger shadow, releasing a burst of bubbles directly into its path. The large shape recoiled, turning away. Sura circled it, tight and fast, driving bubbles along its flank. The creature turned again, retreating toward deeper water. "What is that thing?" Leah whispered. "I don't know. But she's keeping it away from the boats." Leah cursed softly. "Then she's protecting us?" "Sura doesn't think in those terms," Nora said. "She's protecting her hunting ground. The fish, the young, and maybe us as a side effect." The large shape sank. Sura followed until the bubbles dissipated completely. Nora exhaled a shaky breath. She wasn't just hunting today. "No," Leah said. She was defending. The patrol boat appeared on the horizon, cutting across the waves with authority. Nora felt the dread before the radio even clicked on. "Anna Rose, this is Harbor Patrol. Be advised, Federal Marine Enforcement is responding. We need all research vessels to clear the area." Leah muttered a curse. "They're going after her." They headed back reluctantly. Nora's mind spun with images, crescents, columns, pillars of bubbles rising in defense. Sura mastering the water like it was a language. When they reached the harbor, the enforcement boat was already tied up at the central pier. An officer stepped out. "Dr. Klein," he said. "We need to talk." She wiped her palms against her jeans. "About the bubble structures?" "About the whale." He led her to a quiet corner of the dock where no fishermen stood nearby. "We've had 3 incidents in weeks involving dangerous water conditions," he said. 2 fatalities. 1 near fatality. All near locations where this orca has been recorded. Nora steadied her voice. "Correlations aren't causation." "Understood," he said. "But if an animal is shaping the water in ways that endanger boats, swimmers, divers, intentionally or not, we have to intervene." "Intervene how?" Nora asked. His silence was answer enough. You can't punish an orca for being intelligent, she said. He met her eyes. We can prevent more accidents. Nora stepped closer. She is not attacking people. She is not targeting boats. She is refining a hunting pattern humans keep drifting into by accident. Dr. Klein, he said calmly, your footage shows advanced problem solving, advanced manipulation. If she continues evolving her technique, she isn't evolving, Nora snapped. She's learning. I'm not sure there's a difference. For the first time, Nora felt something like fear not of Sura, but of what humans might do when faced with an intelligence they couldn't control. That night, she reviewed her footage again in her apartment. Bubble rings, bubble walls, bubble columns, the crescent nets, the vortexes, the teaching moments. Sura's awareness of the boat, her adjustments. She paused on a frame where Sura surfaced near the hull, head angled upward just slightly, eye catching the light, watching, thinking, measuring. Nora's throat tightened. Please, she whispered to the empty room, stay away from them. But Sura had already pushed into a territory no orca had navigated before, the space between human understanding and ecological instinct. And once a creature crosses that line, humans rarely react with grace. They react with fear, and sometimes with force. The enforcement boats weren't the only danger coming. Something else was moving in the deep water. Something Sura had tried twice to push back. And the next time it surfaced, humans would be caught in the middle. Because the bubbles weren't just tools anymore. They were warnings. And no one but Sura knew how close the danger really was. The days that followed were tense in a way the harbor hadn't experienced in years. Not the tense where storms built on the horizon or where fuel prices climbed. This was a different kind, the kind that made people speak in half sentences and watch the water like it was holding its breath. Fishermen who once cursed Orcas now scanned the ocean for Sura's fin with something like dread. Nora walked the docks each morning with the same uneasy pressure in her chest, knowing Sura was somewhere below the surface, refining behaviors faster than any animal she'd ever documented. The bubble crescent still spiraled in her mind. The columns still rose behind her vision when she blinked. She had the footage backed up in 3 places, but she didn't need it to remember every detail. The enforcement boats had begun patrolling aggressively, sweeping areas where Sura had last been seen. Their lights cut through fog at night. Their engines droned at dawn. Some fishermen welcomed the oversight. Others resented it. A few quietly admitted they trusted Sura more than the federal officers. Not everyone voiced it, but nearly everyone felt it. There was something else out there. Something that made Sura behave in ways no one could explain. Something deeper than bubbles. On a gray morning when the wind skimmed the water in sharp strokes, Nora boarded the Anna Rose with Leah again. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours. Her mind replaying the image of the massive shadow Sura had driven back with bubble columns. No marine mammal she knew fit that shape. No whale, no shark. Nothing documented. Where? Leah asked as she untied the mooring rope. Same place, Nora said. Deep ridge. Near the drop-off. If we see enforcement, we keep clear, Nora said. But we need to see what Sura is reacting to. Leah gave a low grunt. Let's hope it doesn't see us first. They left the harbor. The water beyond the breakwater felt heavier today, the swell slower, as if the sea itself was considering something. Near the ridge, Nora lowered the hydrophone. Static, then the hum of currents. Then clicks, fast, sharp, too sharp. Her pulse jumped. She's close. But the pattern wasn't quite right. There was something beneath it, a second rhythm layered behind the primary clicks. Not mimicry. Not communication. Something like rumbling. Something too low frequency to belong to an orca. Nora's skin prickled. She's not alone. They drifted another minute. Then Leah pointed. There. A disturbance appeared 50 yards away. Not bubbles yet, but the subtle distortion that came before them. The surface seemed to tremble. Then the bubbles formed, not rings, not crescents, straight walls. Rows of rising columns forming an arc. Sura surfaced behind them, tail slapping hard enough to send ripples toward the Ana Rose. "She's not hunting," Nora said. "She's building a barrier." "For what?" Leah asked. Before Nora could respond, the water on the opposite side of the bubble wall bulged upward. A massive shadow rose beneath the surface, not breaching, but pushing water ahead of it like a force that didn't care about the shape of the sea. Leah swore softly. "That's the thing from before." Sura lunged toward the shadow, driving bubbles into its flank. The creature turned sharply, sending a swell rolling toward the boat. Leah braced against the rail. "Should we get out of here?" she asked. Nora shook her head. "Not until we see how she's handling it." Sura circled the shadow in a rapid loop, adding more columns, cutting the water into shapes that forced the thing to turn this way, then that way, never rising fully. The precision was breathtaking. Each bubble release landed exactly where it needed to, forming currents that nudged the creature's path. "She's redirecting it," Nora said, "driving it away from the fishing grounds." "How do you know that?" "Because she's pushing it toward deeper water," Nora said. "Away from where boats work." The creature retreated, sliding back into the trench. Sura followed just far enough to confirm, then broke off, resurfacing with a sharp exhale. Leah exhaled. "So she's protecting us?" Nora shook her head. "Protecting the ecosystem. And if we're in it, we benefit." Sura swam toward the Ana Rose, not aggressively, not even fast, simply coming close enough that Nora could see the white of her eye patch and the delicate ripples her body left behind. She lifted her head slightly as she passed, watching, thinking, processing. Then she dove deep. Nora stared after her long after she vanished. "She's solving a problem we don't understand, or preventing one," Leah added. But not everyone interpreted it that way. By noon, word had spread about another bubble disturbance near the ridge. Someone heard someone else mention dangerous activity, which morphed into aggressive whale behavior, which morphed into, "That orca is attacking something out there." No one knew what she was attacking, but fear never waits for facts. That afternoon, enforcement called an emergency meeting at the harbor office. Nora attended reluctantly, folding her arms as the lead officer laid out his stance. 3 accidents. Multiple near incidents. One whale repeatedly creating dangerous underwater disturbances in navigational zones. "We need to consider deterrent protocols." Nora felt heat rise in her face. "You don't punish an animal for innovating. Dr. Klein, she's not attacking boats. She's not targeting people. You have no data supporting that." "We have escalating incidents," he replied, "and escalating complexity. If this behavior continues unchecked, someone will die." Nora stepped forward. Someone already died. 2 someones. And neither death had evidence linking it to her. "But bubbles were present," he said sharply. "And if she is capable of reshaping water movement to trap fish or influence vessel stability, we cannot ignore the hazard." Nora stared at him. "You're talking about a creature who is learning faster than we can study her. We should be observing, understanding, not threatening her. Understanding her won't matter if she puts a boat under." The room fell silent. That was always the fear, the one no fisherman wanted to say aloud. What if those bubble rings grew large enough, powerful enough, to destabilize a vessel? Even unintentionally? Nora felt a sick ache twist inside her. "We need to be smarter than fear," she said quietly. But fear had already gotten a foothold. That evening, while most of the town ate dinner or watched TV or tried to convince themselves everything was fine, Nora sat alone at her apartment table, watching the footage from that morning. Sura building walls of bubbles. Sura shaping the current. Sura positioning herself between the shadow and the shallows. The bubble columns were precise, too precise for coincidence. Nora rewound the footage again and again, analyzing the spacing between columns, the angle of her turns, the changes in velocity. Sura was forming patterns with structure, something akin to geometry mapped onto fluid motion. "She's using the water like architecture," Nora whispered. Her phone buzzed. "Leah, you should come down to the pier," Leah said. "Something's happening." Nora grabbed her keys and ran. When she reached the water, she saw them immediately. 3 enforcement boats. Their lights glowed soft yellow in the damp night air. Their engines idled low. Officers stood at the rails, night vision binoculars held tight. "What are they doing?" Nora asked. "They're tracking her," Leah said. Nora's stomach dropped. "They can't get close to her. It'll change her behavior, or worse." "They're not intervening yet," Leah said. "They're watching," but Nora could see it in their posture, the way they stood ready, the tension in their shoulders. They weren't just watching. They were hunting, not with weapons. Not yet, but with intention. And intention was just one step away from action. The officers didn't move far. They hovered near the same ridge Nora had visited earlier. The water showed no sign of Sura, no bubbles, no fin, no spiraling herring. But Nora felt something under the surface. A pressure, a presence. "She's here," Nora said quietly. "How do you know?" Leah asked. Nora didn't answer. She felt it. The officers began scanning in long arcs. And then a single bubble rose. One, just one, from deep below the enforcement boats. It popped softly. Then another surfaced. And another. A line, a warning, a message. Sura was telling them she was here, and she did not like being followed. One of the officers leaned forward. "We've got movement." Nora stepped closer to the pier rail. "Don't provoke her." But enforcement didn't hear her. The bubbles tightened into a ring. A perfect glowing circle beneath the patrol boats. Not hunting, not trapping fish, not building a wall. A statement. "I think she's surrounding us," one officer said over the radio. "No," Nora murmured. "She's showing you what she can do." The boats held position. The water stilled. Then the ring widened, not to trap, but to push. A subtle outward current nudged the hulls, rocking them gently but unmistakably. "She's escorting you out," Nora whispered. The officers shifted, uneasy. "What's happening?" one asked. Nora wanted to scream. "She's telling you to leave her alone." But before she could speak, something else rose beneath the surface. The large shadow again, closer than ever, pushing bubbles ahead of it in thick plumes. Sura darted between the shadow and the boats, releasing a burst of tighter columns that redirected the creature's path downward. If she hadn't been there, Nora didn't finish the thought. The officers stepped back from the rail, shaken. "What the hell was that?" someone whispered. But Sura didn't surface to explain. She dove deeper and deeper after the shadow until the bubble trails thinned and the dark water swallowed both creatures. The enforcement boats drifted for a moment, rattled. Then they turned back toward the harbor. Nora watched their lights fade across the black water, her heart pounding, every nerve alive with the terrifying wonder of it all. Sura wasn't a threat. She was a barrier, a guardian, an intelligence working at the edge of human comprehension. But the gap between understanding and fear was widening, and Nora felt it in her bones. Something was coming, something big, something only Sura understood. And humans, caught between awe and panic, were not ready for what the next bubble ring would bring. The next morning arrived pale and muted, a thin veil of fog clinging low over the harbor. Voices along the docks were quieter than usual. The men who normally shouted across boats now spoke in controlled murmurs, glancing out toward the ridge as if expecting the water to rise up and answer them. Even gulls seemed to arc lower, their wings brushing the mist instead of slicing through it. Nora stepped onto the pier with the weight of a sleepless night hanging behind her eyes. Her mind kept replaying the image of Sura circling the enforcement boats, bubbles rising, water shifting, the shadow rising beneath everything. That shadow, whatever it was. Sura had pushed it back twice now. For whose sake? Her pods? The fish stocks? The humans that drifted cluelessly overhead? No one could answer that. Maybe not even Sura. Leah appeared from behind a stack of crates, thermos in hand. "You're up early. Did you sleep?" Nora asked. No. They exchanged a look, one that said they didn't need coffee to know something was coming, something inevitable. The enforcement officer from the meeting walked down the dock carrying binoculars and a radio. He gave them a stiff nod. "Dr. Klein," he said. "Captain Saunders. We're expanding the surveillance grid. Your footage from yesterday raised serious concerns." Concerns. The word lingered like frost. "We're not escalating," he added quickly, "but we can't ignore what we saw." "You saw a whale trying to protect her territory," Nora said. "And we saw something else out there," he replied. Nora studied his expression and realized, with a flicker of surprise, that he wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't puffing up enforcement protocol. He was afraid. "Whatever that thing was," he said quietly, "it wasn't a whale. If it surfaces near a boat, we could lose the boat." Nora's mouth went dry. "Then don't corner Sura. She's the only one keeping it down." His eyes narrowed. "You really believe that?" "I know it." He exhaled sharply, then nodded once. "Then we stay clear of her, unless the situation changes." Nora didn't like the wording. Unless the situation changes. It always did. The day passed with little movement on the water. No new sightings, no bubble rings, no shadow, no enforcement activity beyond idle patrolling. For a brief moment, Nora let herself imagine the danger might have passed. But late afternoon changed everything. The first call came from a trawler captain who reported massive turbulence near the southern inlet. Not waves, not current, not wind. A disturbance from below. 10 minutes later, a kayaker radioed in, his voice shaking. "The water is fizzing huge bubbles, moving fast something dark, under me too big too fast." Then static. A third call came from a crabber. "Something's pushing up from the trench. Something's rising." The harbor erupted. Engines roared to life. Radios crackled. People pointed out toward the open water, their faces pale. Leah grabbed Nora's arm. "We're going," she said. "Get your gear." Nora didn't argue. Within minutes, the Anna Rose burst through the breakwater, spray misting over its bow. The horizon looked wrong, a strange ripple pulsing across the surface, lifting and lowering in uneven breaths. Ahead of it, several kayaks scrambled toward safer water. "Where is it?" Leah muttered. "Where's Sura?" As if answering the question, a dorsal fin broke the surface far ahead, slicing through the swell with controlled urgency. Sura. She swam hard, faster than Nora had ever seen her move, sending bursts of bubbles behind her as she cut across the disturbed patch of sea. The bubbles weren't rings this time. They weren't walls or columns. They were streaks, flashing lines of rising silver, marking the water like warning flares. "Sura signaling," Nora said. "Urgent communication." "To who?" Leah asked. "To anyone who understands." The shadow appeared seconds later. Not deep this time, not hidden. It surged upward, broad and dark, closer to the surface than ever before. The water above it swelled, mounded, rising unnaturally before collapsing. Boats nearby rocked violently. One small kayak flipped. The kayaker shouted, clinging to the overturned hull. Leah steered toward him, but Sura got there first. She cut through the water in a tight arc, releasing a burst of bubbles so thick it looked like a boiling cauldron. The surge she created pushed the kayak, and the man, away from the rising shape underneath. She saved him, Nora breathed. Again, but the shadow didn't retreat. It rose. A long, dark ridge breached the surface for the first time, shimmering black, water pouring off it. Not a fin, not a fluke. Something else, something unfamiliar. The ridge sank again, but not before leaving a long wake behind it. Leah gripped the helm. What in God's name is that? Nora didn't answer. Her brain was struggling to reconcile the shape with any known marine species. Nothing matched. Sura lunged at the ridge, driving a violent explosion of bubbles into the creature's path. The shadow recoiled, turning sharply, and for a moment it seemed to sink. Then it accelerated. Straight toward the Ana Rose. "Hold on," Leah yelled. The water bulged beneath them. Nora grabbed the rail, heart slamming her ribs. Something enormous passed under the hull, so fast the depth finder spiked and went silent. Sura rocketed after it, releasing a spiraling chain of bubbles in its wake. Not walls, not rings, something new. Something more complex. Bubbles rising in staggered waves, catching the creature in a tightening corridor of currents. "She's corralling it," Nora whispered. "The way she corrals herring. For a creature that size?" Leah said. "She can't hold it." "No," Nora said, her voice trembling. "But she can redirect it." And she did. The spiraling bubble corridor forced the creature to veer left, away from the boats. It released a low shudder through the water, not sound, but vibration, before diving deep again. For a moment, the water calmed. Nora exhaled shakily. Leah wiped sweat from her forehead. "Is it over?" "No," Nora knew before the hydrophone crackled. Clicks, fast, sharp, desperate. Sura calling her pod. 4 dorsal fins rose around her seconds later. Her mother, her sibling, 2 juveniles. They formed a half ring around Sura, positioning themselves between her and the trench. "They're preparing," Nora said. For one more push, the water went silent again. Then the shadow surged upward, faster than before, angling straight for the shallow inlet where 3 recreational boats drifted unaware. Nora's stomach dropped. "If that thing hits those boats, I know," Leah said, turning the helm. But Sura was already moving. She dove directly into the creature's path, releasing the most complex bubble structure Nora had ever seen. A tight spiral within a larger circle, twisting currents that sliced the water into shifting walls. It threw the creature off course. Temporarily, the pod joined her, releasing bubbles of their own, weaker, less controlled, but adding to the structure. Together they built a living maze, forcing the massive shape to twist, turn, hesitate. "Come on," Nora whispered. "Come on, Sura." The creature turned one last time, and Sura drove straight at it, exploding a burst of bubbles so dense they obscured the entire surface. The shadow dropped, slowly, then faster, returning to the trench. The water went still again. Not calm. Too much had happened for calm. But still, Sura surfaced alone. Her pod lingered behind her, forming a loose semicircle. She was tired. Nora could see it in her movements, the way her dorsal fin wobbled, the way she rose slower, sank deeper. She approached the Ana Rose, not close enough to touch, just close enough that Nora could see the intelligence in her eye as she turned her head slightly upward. Nora blinked back tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You kept everyone safe, even the ones who feared you." Sura held her gaze a moment longer. Then she turned, and she swam toward the trench. Her pod followed, not hurried, not frightened, just steady, purposeful, like guardians returning to their post. The boats in the harbor watched her go. Every person who had doubted her, feared her, cursed her, they all watched that fin slip beneath the dark line of the trench and vanish. Sura did not return in the days that followed, not because she fled, not because she was injured, but because she had done what she came to do. She had contained the threat. She had taught her pod what she knew. She had shown the humans what bubbles could do. She had rewritten everything they believed about intelligence in the sea. Weeks later, Nora stood on the breakwater at dusk, watching the tide pull back from the rocks. She thought about bubble rings, bubble walls, corridors, spirals. She thought about the creature in the trench, still down there, still dangerous, still unknown. She thought about the enforcement boats, quieter now, the fishermen, more cautious, the kayakers, more aware. But most of all, she thought about Sura, an orca who used air and water like tools, an orca who understood cause and effect, an orca who used intelligence not only to hunt, but to defend. Nora whispered into the wind, "We are not the only ones shaping the world." The sea didn't answer. It didn't have to, because the bubbles Sura left behind, those shimmering rings and spirals that rose from the deep, had told Nora everything she needed to know. Intelligence is not a human invention. Strategy is not a human privilege. And the ocean holds minds that will outthink us long before we understand them. If this story opened your eyes to the mysteries beneath the waves, remember to like and subscribe. There are more stories waiting in the deep, and some of them are watching us back.